Okay, Darren, I think we'll go first. Okay, I know one or two more might come in, so at the risk of people stumbling in the dark, we'll hang on a second. But I will introduce our next speaker. David Hicks has published 2 books on the architectural and social history of the Irish country house. He's presented lectures on behalf of the Dublin and London chapters of the Irish Georgian Society, plus several talks for the OPW in Farmleigh, Doneraile Court and Emo Court. And this year he presented a paper at the Historic Houses International Conference in Maynooth University. He's featured on numerous media outlets speaking about the architectural history of Ireland and has had articles featured in the Sunday Times, Irish Times and the Irish Arts Review, to name but a few publications. I thoroughly encourage you to go to his website, davidhicksbook.blogspot.com, or just Google David Hicks and Irish Country Houses. You'll definitely find his work. It's truly awesome. I love his, both the photographs of his architectural research, but also the history behind it. By the way, that reminds me, would everyone check their phones? Thank you for reminding me where that was. Thank you very much. So would everyone just check their phones to make sure to put on silent? Even if you think it's on silent. I remember once where I warned everyone and my phone went off and it was my mother ringing me. Not your fault, ma'am. It's not your fault. So, without further ado, I will introduce you to our next speaker, David Hicks. Give him a warm welcome, and I'm sure you'll be entertained by his talk.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you all for being here this evening. Now, let's get this going. Yeah. Now.
Sorry, I turned it off.
Okay, here we go. So I'd like to thank you all for being here this evening. My name is David Hicks, and as Liam said there, I am the author of 2 books on the Irish country house, the social and architectural history of the house, and then my second book related to the art associated with the Irish country house. I have given talks for numerous societies. This is me in May presenting a talk or presenting a paper in Maynooth University for the Historic Houses International Conference. I've also given talks in Doneraile, in Farmleigh, in Emo Court as well. In 2011, I began to write my first book at the dining room table of my family home in Carrakelly. And you never know where it would take you. I've met numerous people, I've been to lots of houses like this, and I've garnered a number of fans. This is one of my biggest, and one of the shortest as well. So we're here this evening to talk about the changing face of Ballina. So when Liam contacted me, I thought about this, and I thought, how are we going to explore this? So we'll begin here with Ballina in 1837. And what's interesting about this image is you will note that St Muredach's Cathedral has no spire. A spire would not come until about 20 years later in the 1850s. You'll see, I think there should be a pointer. No, there isn't. You'll see here the vernacular buildings along the edge of the river, and you'll see St Michael's Church in the background, representing the 2 traditions that would have existed in the town at the time. Again, we have the bridges represented, and we have houses. You can see houses on Hill Street and Piper's Hill. But what's interesting about this sort of sketch medium that the town is represented in, it wasn't reliable, and you're going to see why. Here we have the mountain of Nathan, a huge colossus rivaling Everest in the background. And if you compare it with the same view today, you would be slightly disappointed. So then photography came along, and here's one of the earliest images of Ballina that has been featured a lot this evening. It's from the Wynne collection in Castlebar, and it represents Ireland, or Ballina, should I say, in the 1880s. What you'll notice is the thatched structure in the middle of Pearse Street in Ballina, and you'll see how this photography, this medium, is a great way for understanding how the town has changed. And if we compare images of the town as it was and as it is, you can see the development And that's one thing I probably would note about Ballina. Ballina is something that is constantly changing, constantly evolving. Businesses are changing, buildings are changing, families are changing. So there's a constant state of flux about the town. We like to think, oh, the town has remained the same, and it has never changed. However, even in our recent history, if you sit down and look at the businesses and the buildings that have even come and gone in your lifetime, you'll notice how the town has changed. So as I said, the wonderful thing about the photographs in the collection of the National Library is the detail, like the fantastic detail we can see here. We can see the thatched building, we can see the name of the business here, James McNally, and if the people, some of them you can see have obviously moved, but you can see the dress and sort of the state of the town at that time. As photography improved, so did the town of Ballina. Buildings improved, businesses. This is Boland's Sale Room at the top of King Street in Ballina, which was later replaced with the building that we're more familiar with now as the post office. And as I said, the detail in these photos, it's really worth your while if you go on the National Library website and actually, take photographs and enlarge them, that you can really see the detail, such as the shop here, the articles for sale outside, even the trunks for sale outside as well. Also, there's businesses that have come and gone. This ad came to me this week. It's from 1896, and this is for Charles Garvey. And you'll notice we are familiar with the Garvey family having a bakery in Ballina, but this is for his Imperial Fancy Bakery at Arran Street in Ballina. As I said, there's businesses in recent times that have come and gone. There's Queenan's Drapers that has come and gone, and also Handley's of Pearse Street. So that's what I'm saying. The town has constantly evolved and changed, even though we think it remains the same. We have a great collection of original shop fronts in Ballina. We have Adamson's here, and I came across this ad from 1914. This is for Adamson's pig powder. So if you had a pig that was a little bit down in the mouth, needed a bit of a lift, you gave it this, and your pig would be transformed. We also have Heffernan's Butcher Shop in Ballina, which I think this is one of the amazing facades that we have in North Mayo. The two heifer heads or cow heads or whatever breed of an animal they are, recently wonderfully restored, and I think it's one of the architectural treasures of our town. So here we have Knox Street, now known as Pearse Street in the 1800s. Again, if you enlarge the detail, here we have the Moy Hotel. And I would say take note of the sign over the Moy Hotel, and you'll notice the lantern that descends from it. Also as well, you can't just see it, but on the back of that cart, it says the Moy Hotel Ballina, or carriage, should I say. They'd probably be insulted if I called it a cart. And also as well as we're lucky that this building has survived, dating from the 1860s. As I said, even a section of the original sign has survived, albeit the lantern has not. Another image here that's very interesting, we're coming into colour now from black and white. You'll notice the telegraph poles in the town. You'll also know the cars and vans. And also, it's showing a way of life that's beginning to disappear. We see the gentleman with the horse and cart there over in the corner. Cartography is another way to chart the development, the changes in Ballina. Here we have a map dating from 1837 to 1896. And Liam mentioned about the change of the names in Ballina, of the streets in 1922. But here we have Arran Street, King Street, Bridge Street has remained the same, and Knox Street. Knox Street was named after the influential Knox family, a landed family who originated in Rappa Castle near Crossmolina. Unfortunately, now a ruin. But the Knox family extended from here, and they built palatial homes, such as Balleek Manor, or Mount Falcon, just outside the town. Now, also, as I was going to say, not only has the physical, we'll say, architectural environment of Ballina changed, and we'll say the business environment, but as I also mentioned, the people have changed, the faces have changed. So I'm sort of going to speak this evening about branches, extended branches of my family. So we have names like the Orchard family, we have the Hume family, we have the Emerson family, the Wills and Patterson families, and the Ballina family as well. And these are all families that contributed to Ballina and made Ballina what it is today. Probably you'll note they are probably from the Protestant background, so that can be a controversial one in terms of the history of any town. So I'll begin with my own family. This is the Hicks family. John Hicks came to Easky in 1860 from Kilmechanic in County Wicklow. His son Arthur bought Moyview in 1910, and this is the original Warren cottage at Moyview. The Hickses built a larger house. I wouldn't say the house that came after it was an attractive house. Like, I would not say my great-grandfather was an architect. He wasn't. But what I love about this image is the composition of it. That's my grandfather on the horse. That's my granduncle on the rocking horse. And what I love is they also included the dog as well. Like, this is 1920. And also there's a certain charm to the Warren cottage, such as the thatched roof, but then nearly sort of a conflict in terms of vernacular architecture, the large wyatt windows, which would be highly unusual. So this would be my great-grandparents, Arthur and Harriet Hicks, as people who were at my previous talk in the Kennedy Centre for the that was spoken about earlier. I would have gone into great detail about the Knox family and what they got up to, but anyways, that's for another day. So anyways, Harriet and Arthur's children, this will be one of them, this will be Basil Hicks. This is a picture of him in 1939 on a boat in front of the castle at Castle Connor. Now, what I think is amazing about this photograph is, even with our mobile phones today and our advanced technology, trying to capture this image would be quite difficult. The Hickses also captured life on the river, such as fishing on the river. They also had this car, which sort of seems to appear in photographs around Inniscrone. They also captured part of their community as well. So here's the ice house that we're all familiar with in Ballina, which is now a hotel and greatly changed. But this would be the home of the Thorntons, and this is whom the Hickses would have been friends with. Again, they captured life from Ballina, and probably these photos are some of the most fascinating. These are the weirs in Ballina, in use, men working on them. We can see buildings. Some buildings are gone, some we're sort of partially familiar with. And then we have them putting out nets on the river. This is sort of below Victoria Terrace, Emmett Street, and this is in the 1930s and 40s. So just pardon me for 1 second. Now, you can all take a read of that there. So this is the marriage of my grandparents in the 1940s. And they say here, popular families unite. So this was the union between the Hicks family and the Wills family, and the Wills family of Arran Street in Ballina. Now, you'll notice that my grandmother's name was Violet Hume Wills. Now, the interesting thing, and I think it's sort of a tradition that in my family we've lost, is that if there was a family name, we'll say from a woman that married into the family that was in danger of dying out, they gave that name as a middle name to their children. So that's why you'll see Violet Hume Wills. And the Hume family and the Wills family were of Arran Street in Ballina. And for the eagle-eyed among you, in the top corner, you can actually see Murphy's Mills, because they got married at St. Michael's Church in Ballina. So Murphy's Mills, a lumen presence in the background. So as I said, the Wills and Hume family, they lived at Arran Street in Ballina, big arrow there. And Arran Street was named after Lord Arran, and here we have the sixth holder of the title. He would have lived... He didn't live all the time because he had another house in the UK, but his home in this area was Castlegore near Crossmolina, which was burnt in the 1920s and unfortunately is also a ruin today. So as I said, the home of the Hume and Wills family was in Arran Street in Ballina, and this is an image of the premises, which sadly now is demolished. This is an image of the shop and the house in 1963 when it was sold. So the Hume family, we have Margaret Hume of Arran Street. She was the daughter of Samuel and Marjorie Hume, and she married John Patterson of Carrakelly. Now, they married in 1853, so this gives you some idea of the age of these photographs. Usually it was the way that photographs were usually taken for important events like marriage. And all I can say is that if this is the result of their wedding photos, it wouldn't endear you to the institution. So Margaret's sister, Rebecca Hume of Arran Street, she had a sister, Susan, and a brother as well, Samuel, and Rebecca is seen here with her niece, May Hunter. And we're talking now about sort of the late 1890s, early 1900s. And the thing is about Rebecca Hume, the Hume family and later the Wills family, the women in the family appeared to be very entrepreneurial and very industrious. And Rebecca ran a boarding house in Arran Street in Ballina. But there also appears to have been a shop as well, because Rebecca's niece, Elizabeth Patterson, she, in Slater's directory in the 1901 and 1911 census, there is mention of a shop. So these women, very industrious, they had a boarding house, they had a shop. So Elizabeth's sister, Mary Jane Wills, nee Patterson, she was Patterson, she married Wills. She married this gentleman from John Wills. And this is where the Wills family come into Arran Street in Ballina. He was born in 1868 in Rossirk. Interesting thing about this man, he had a very unusual job. He was a steward. And he was a steward for the very wealthy Jemison family, who lived, this is one of their houses, this is not the house, one of their houses, Sutton Castle in Dublin. Now, the Jemison family owned a lot of land, not the best land. They owned 7,000 acres that extended from Ballycastle in County Mayo to Bellacorrick. And on that land, they had a hunting lodge, of which John Wills was the steward. So here is Sheskin Lodge near Belmullet. If you go looking for it, this is all that remains today. And it is found at the heart of a wood, and you have to walk about 2 miles from the main road to actually find it. But this is unfortunately all that remains of the house. This was the hunting lodge of the Jemison family, and this is where John Wills and his wife and their children would have called home, because they would have been the stewards sort of looking after the family and the estate. Unfortunately, John Wills, at the age of 42, contracted stomach cancer. The Jemison family tried to bring him to Dublin to actually treat him for his illness, but he only got as far as Arran Street in Ballina, where he died in 1909 at the age of 42. He left behind his widow and their 6 children. And the little boy in the front here, he was only born a month before his father's death in 1909. Again, I have to admire this woman. This woman, she educated her 6 children. The little boy on the far side, he became a manager of one of the largest banks in Belfast. And also, she educated her daughter, the tall girl at the back. She was also trained for the bank as well. However, this is one thing we forget sometimes when we're reading history. These are extremely sad, hard times. And Mary Jane's eldest daughter, Gladys Wills, she died in 1921 of TB. And even as a child, she was sent to live in Arran Street, while the rest of her family lived in Castle Road. She was sent to live in Arran Street because she had TB and to separate her from the other children. Gladys's sister, Edith Margaret Wills, she was the last holder of Arran Street, and she had a shop there. Now, it was there up until the 60s. I don't want to question anyone's age. Do they remember it? But it was a lady's drapery shop, and she sold it in 1963, and she died herself in 1968. Ballina flour mills. When I read about this, I'm so impressed by it. Here we had an industry in the town powered by the River Moy, powered by the river itself, in terms of sustainability, in terms of everything to do with the environment today. This is probably something that would be admired and something that the rest of the country would look to. Unfortunately, cheaper imports, etc., put paid to the flour mills. But this brings about another connection with my family. Here's an ad for the flour mills from the 1940s. You can see the last wing being built there in the 1940s. But this brings me to the connection with my family and the flour mills in Ballina. Arthur Balaam, born in Dublin in 1913, he served his time in Murphy's Mills and eventually came back to manage the mills in the 1960s. And the mill house does survive today, and this is the mill house in the 1960s. And I think what's interesting is you talk about today, your employer not allowed to contact you after 8 o'clock or after 5 o'clock in the evening. Look how close the manager's house is to the mill. Like, you're literally living on the job. Now, members of my family through John Hicks were members of the RIC, and John Hicks, he had brothers and sons that were in the RIC. I have found a vague reference to a Constable Hicks in Ballina in the early 1900s, but as to the name, it just says Constable Hicks. John Hicks's wife, Isabella Hicks nee Emerson, born in Fermanagh in 1835. This is a picture from our house. We always remark she's such a good-looking woman. But but if you think about the sadness at the time, this woman had 2 sons that died in the 1890s. One son died of the flu. Like, we take the flu, that you'll get over today. One of her sons died of the flu. Her other son died of TB. She had 2 daughters, though, one of which, May Hicks, married Reginald Adams Orchard from Ballina. She married him in Dalkey in 1907. And the Orchard family lived on number 7 Francis Street in Ballina. We'll all be familiar with this street because it's opposite the courthouse. Now, this brings about one of the most interesting pictures I've ever had the privilege of researching. I found this picture. On the rear of it was the name Hicks, was the name Orchard, was the name St. Andrews, and the crucial date, May 1916. So when I began to sort of compare it with family photographs, we have Reverend Orchard, he was a clergyman. We have his wife, May, her sister, Lizzie, and the third woman I haven't identified. The house is St. Andrews, near Ballsbridge in Dublin. And the reason why it sort of became apparent is the soldiers that were outside the house commandeered the house in 1916 as they were sent over because of the 1916 rising in April. And what I find interesting here is that if you go through the archives, here's Reverend Orchard's claim for damage to his house. And what I find interesting is he claims for £18 worth of damage, but the authorities that be do not take the word of a clergyman and give him £3. So, as I said, the interesting thing about the image here is, despite the fact that they were claiming for damage to their house, despite the fact that they said they were imposed by the soldiers, they seem quite happy to arrange this photograph and pose with them. No matter what your political persuasions is about British soldiers in Ireland, you have to think of the age of these men. And these men were sent to Ireland, and after that they were sent off to fight in the Great War. One of the men here, I can't identify him, but there was a Sidney Tyers, and he was aged 22 at the time that this photo was taken, and he was actually killed a year later in a battle during the First World War, and his body was never found. The interesting thing, and the one thing that catches everyone's eye about this photo, is this gentleman and his wife that appear at the window. And this gentleman here with the beard is William Patterson Orchard, and he was the county surveyor for Mayo. He was appointed in 1877, and he served in the role up until 1911. And as I said, he lived at number 7 Francis Street in Ballina. Now, here we have his registration for the Institution of Civil Engineers from 1896, and you'll see William Patterson Orchard, County Surveyor of Ballina, County Mayo, and he was born in 1850. While he was County Surveyor in the area, he was responsible for a number of roads, a number of bridges, and he was also responsible for when anything was built in Ballina, and this was mentioned previously by Liam, the 1798 Centenary Memorial, also known as the Humber Memorial. What's interesting about this is when the committee wanted to find a spot to put it in, they had to converse with William Patterson Orchard. And this brings me back to the face at the window again. When I seen this gentleman, I thought, I have seen this face somewhere before. And this is where I've seen it. This is a picture that is purported to be Arthur Muffany. However, I'll let ye all have eyes. You can all make up your own mind about this. My argument why this is not Arthur Muffany, but is in fact William Patterson Orchard, is the fact that he lived at number 7 Francis Street. This is the Jackson Vaughan Memorial, which is just below it. He was the county surveyor at the time. And also as well, when I thought about it, Arthur Muffany, he was the head of the committee for the construction of the 1798 memorial. He was a nationalist. He was a contemporary of Michael Davitt. He was jailed for his opposition to landlordism. And one has to wonder, why would Arthur Muffany pose with a memorial to a local landlord? So I think this gives more credibility that this gentleman is in fact William Patterson Orchard. So I think the great thing about any talk is I think I've given you something to think about and discuss. And you can all, when this is over, discuss whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong. So that brings me to the end of my talk. If you want to sort of read more about the history of Ballina, I've recently just posted a new blog post about the monuments of Ballina, about the Jackson Vaughan font and the Humbert Memorial as well. These were both, there was both committees formed in 1898 to construct these. I feel they represent two traditions, and in this piece I discuss about how we'll say they nearly competed with how they nearly competed with each other, but you can have a read of that in your own time. You can follow me on Instagram. There I post regularly about the history of Ballina, the history of the country. It's lots of nice pictures for those of you. I do get questions sometimes from people going, oh, what's that all about? And it's like, there is a little bit of text with it as well. But as I said, I post there. You can see there's posts there about Ballina. Rappa Castle is over there as well. You can also follow me on Facebook, and you can also follow me on Twitter as well. And thank you for listening to me this evening. I hope that there's something of interest. And as I said, just one thing I'd like to say is I'm not sort of saying my family are unique, my family are different. What I'm saying is all our families and all our attics contain photographs that would shed more light on the history of Ballina. So possibly, maybe one thing we should look at is how do we compile these pictures into a database for reference, and how we can, we'll say, historians of the future, how they can learn from our discoveries. Thank you very much.
Thanks a million, David. And just to let you know, the Ballina 2020 website, I think will have details, for example, of David's website and related things like that on it, so we can follow from there.